today's video, I wanted to cover the HybridMount app. We did have a video on the channel previously about HybridMount, but it was part of a bigger video, one part of the three things covered there, and it was a while ago. So we'll give you an update on what HybridMount can do for you today. So HybridMount is a largely free application, so you can install it from the App Center completely for free, and it gives you 2 free licenses for some of the functions inside. So we'll go over that. On the unit that I'm demoing today, I don't have any extra licenses, so everything I'm showing you today is possible without paying any extra money for licenses. If you need to go beyond the 2 free licenses, then we do have options available for you. So HybridMount, it's quite a small application. It installs in a couple of minutes. I've got it running here on the TVS-H1288X. So I'm going to open it up, and I've configured a couple of things in there already. But basically, you will get a little tutorial explaining what it can do with the first opening of the application. So you can have that if you want to for a quick explanation, but I'll go over it here for you. So we can see here that I've got 2 things mounted within it at the moment. So that's a clue in the name. It's called HybridMount. It will mount things in different ways. So there's 2 main ways. Number 1, you can mount a cloud location into your NAS, and you can sync it. So you can almost use your NAS as a local cache for some cloud hosted data. And you can also do remote devices, so remote network connections with a multitude of protocols. So in my example here, I've got it with an SMB connection, but you can do things like WebDAV connections, FTP connections, things like that to mount the different storage. So if I go across to my mount management, so you can see what I've got in place already, I've got a cloud management option here, which is my Google Drive from QNAP here. So I've got that mounted and connected, and I've allocated up to 100 gig of cloud space, of local storage for my cloud space. So the most recent 100 gigs of files will automatically be cached locally on my QNAP. So I'm not relying on my internet connection to access the files. If I've accessed a file before, I'll be opening it at local transfer speeds across my network. You can change the priority of this by all means. So if you were to go into the cloud services option here and look at your cloud items, so here's the Google Drive one. If you click on the options on the right, you get quite a few different options. So a bit of information about the connection, cache priority, uploads, and you can even do a speed test. That's really just checking how quick your internet connection can link to the cloud provider you've chosen. So if you were to open that up, you can click speed test, and it takes a minute or so to do a quick run through. But it really will just display the speed of your internet connection more than anything. So here, if I go back to the more option, we can choose things like cache priority. We can get log information. So if I've uploaded a file, they would appear here. So something currently uploading would be there. Anything already uploaded would be there. And if anything had an error, you would see it there as well. So cache priority is one of the coolest sections. So this allows you to prioritize different folders in different ways. So you can expand them out and go down into lower levels. So here in, say, the stuff folder, we can go through and I can say, I want this eBuyer folder to always be synced locally. So you can do a drop down there, and you can say, always keep that in the reserved cache. So ahead of time, I'm already keeping it locally. The first access that I do of anything in that folder, if I was to select this, the first access I do is local speed. The NAS is already going to go off and download everything in that folder, and anytime any files are updated in that folder, it's going to immediately have a local copy stored in this QNAP for me to locally access it much faster. Now the benefit is this, is if you have your cloud solution with a much bigger capacity than I do, so maybe you've got a couple of terabytes up in the cloud, and you don't want to store all 2 terabytes of that locally. You only want to store maybe a couple of 100 gigs of it locally. What you can do is you can use the NAS as a cache for the cloud. So you're still going to get local speed on the data that you need it to, the most access stuff. You're going to be able to have local access to it. And the benefit of the cloud services option is everything that you mount here is going to be accessible just like any other shared folder on your NAS. So if I was to go into my file station option here, so we can see all the different folders that I've got. So we've got the ISOs one. This is one I'll show you in a moment. But what we also have is the Google Drive one. So this Google Drive one is a locally cached, if I want it to be. Anything that I access recently will be stored here. But this will also be accessible over an SMB share. So if you wanted to access it remotely, you can do that as well. And because it's caching locally, it creates a area of storage for it as well. So if I was to go into the storage and snapshot section and go have a look, I put it in pool 1. So we'll see that we've got the HybridMount 1 folder, which was 100 gigs. So that's what I've allocated to this volume for the local caching. So it's directly mounted, it's directly local. So if I wanted to, I can go ahead and change shared network permissions on it, things like that. So you can access that through your shared folder section here, or you can do it directly from in the HybridMount app as well. So you can say edit shared folder permissions and add users with different permissions if you wanted to. So again, the other way to get there would be in the HybridMount. You can just go to the end here and you've got file share permission. It just opens you up straight to the exact same place. So it's very flexible for the cloud hosted ones. So I've got one added here. If I go back to the overview, we can see that there are 2 total free licenses, and I've used 1. So I do have another connection, which is remote devices. But because this isn't a cloud mounted share from a standard provider, this one does not have any licensing restrictions. You can do an unlimited amount of network mounted shares if you wish, using the remote devices option. So again, if I was to mount another one of these, if I click create remote mount, I'll show you the options. So you've got your file cloud gateway, or you've got your network drive mount. So I'll do the network drive. It's going to automatically go off and look for QNAPs, but even if it's not a QNAP, you can specify the IP address manually if you wanted to as well. In my case, I'll just use a QNAP. So here's my TS877. So if I type in the password to access my TS877, click connect, it's going to say which destination folder do I want, and you've got a protocol. So here I could use standard SMB, I can use SFTP, WebDAV, or NFS shares. So you've got a few different options that you can use. So I'm going to browse, and it's going to show me all the folders on my TS877. So let's say I wanted to do it with the public folder. I'll tick that, click apply, and then I can click create. So now what I've got here is I've got the public and the ISO share. So if I go back to the file station view, I've now got the public and ISOs folder. So these ones are now mounted from a separate NAS, but if I want to access these all from a single NAS, such as this TVS-H1288X, I've now got the shared folders from the local NAS as well as some of the remote NAS. So if I was to click into my ISOs folder, I can see that I've got a few different ISOs that are available to me if I wanted to use those in, say, virtualization station for installing a virtual machine, something like that. I do have the option to use those. So you can mount local network shares locally from something else as well. So it's really quick and efficient to access directly from one NAS to another NAS using this. Now, if I was to add another cloud service, so let's say create a remote mount, but this time I'll create a file cloud gateway. This time, let's use a Dropbox one, for example. So it's going to immediately open you up to the API for Dropbox. So it's saying HybridMount would like to access the files and folders in your Dropbox. I'm going to allow that. If you weren't already logged into Dropbox with the web browser you're using, it would ask you to log in there as well. So here it says Dropbox at craigreed@qnap.com. So which folder? I'm going to just do all folders. I'm going to click next. How much cache capacity do I want to put it, and which storage pool do I want to put it? So pool 1 for me is NVMe SSD. Pool 2 would be the hard drive layer. So I'll leave it in pool 1 for now. And you can drag the bars around as well. If you want to set different cache levels for different items, you can move these around if you wanted to fit your requirements a bit better. And you've also got auto download settings, so you can pre-download all recent files, download new files. You can choose a lot of the different options here, and you can change those settings later, of course, as well. So now that's saving the configuration, it's doing the connection, and if I click close there, we've now got the 2 connections that are done. This still got the sync one, so this one's up to date, whereas the new one added the Dropbox one is still thinking about it, it's still mounting. So that one will take a couple of seconds. But if I go to the overview now, we can see that I've used 2 of the 2 licenses. So the 2 licenses are only used by the cloud services. You can do as many of the remote devices as you want. So one thing I will point out is that the SMB access or network share access to the data is only done through the cloud services one. Any remote devices that are added, they are not accessible over a SMB share, for example. So main things, benefits of using it on cloud storage gateways would be you've got smart caching. So you can dedicate a relatively small amount of local space to cache a very large cloud location. You can have integrated workflows so that you can have lots of users accessing all the data at once, regardless of protocol. So you could have some people coming in with WebDAV, so they could remote access the NAS rather than direct to the cloud host. And it works with things like Amazon S3 as well. Really cool to use that as well. You've got encrypted transmission, so everything's SSL encrypted, so it's nice and safe. You've got local access sharing, so you've got multiple local users accessing the cloud data. The cloud files are only downloaded the once. So if you've got 10 people in your local office where traditionally those 10 people would go access the same Excel file multiple times throughout the day, well, they're all causing internet traffic to happen each time they download the file to view it. Whereas if the first person that's accessed it has meant that the file is now cached using the hybrid mount, the next time somebody accesses it, it doesn't have to go to the internet to get it. It's cached locally. The latest version is already on the NAS for them to open. So number one, you save a bit of internet bandwidth, and number two, the person gets the file opened much faster. And it also supports multi-point sync. So if you've got teams working from multiple locations, they can access, sync, share files using the hybrid mount without being limited by the local area network. So it's very easy for users to come in remotely to access the data. Sometimes with some of these cloud accounts, like the S3 especially, you wouldn't generally have all your users separately mounted into the S3. You'd normally create one bucket accessed by one thing, and in this case, that one thing can be the QNAP, and the QNAP can then distribute the access out to everybody else. And also the cloud-based files with the file cloud gateway option, they can be those files can be leveraged by apps in the App Center, so you can use and sort them and use things like our QSearch application to search through the files, mount files from it in different applications like multimedia applications, whereas things with the network drive mount cannot be used for that purpose. So yeah, that's the basic summary of how hybrid mount works. Mount management shows all the options. If I go to the cloud services again, you can see all the options that you get for the cloud services. You don't get very many when you get the remote devices. It's really just a bit of information, and you can have some basic access to it, so you can delete it as well. And even though they're added, you can, if you want to, so say that public one that I just added, you can untick it. So you can still leave all the information there that it's connected if you want to, but if you untick it, it's now no longer mounted actively. So if I was to go back to the file station option, we can see that the public one has disappeared. So it's very easy to just turn on and off as you need it to gain access to those folders. So that's really hybrid mount. So two main features of it. You can mount cloud locations and locally cache the data from your cloud location. Just an example of a use case, we did have a customer with over 200 terabytes stored in the cloud, and they had a lot of remote offices, and especially with the COVID situation, a lot of people working from home. These guys needed faster access to the data, so what they did is they put a relatively small 2-bay NAS at each of the locations they needed. They allocated a couple of terabytes to the local cache, and they were able to have this large, many hundreds of terabytes stored in the cloud. They were able to have fast local access at every location they needed it, with a relatively low investment. They only needed to put a couple of terabytes locally at each location, and everybody was able to have LAN speed access to the cloud data. And again, if you can tune it to what you need, so when you're sort of in one of these options and you want to say change the cache priority, if you can tune it through so that different folders get different access. Sorry, I got no folders in that one. So if you want to tune it so that different folders get different access to, always being reserved in the cache, it can be very, very efficient. So if somebody was to say be using a shared folder at many locations throughout all of your staff, if somebody puts a 1 gig file in their folder at 6 o'clock, packing up time, well, by the morning, everybody else's NAS is going to have that 1 gig file downloaded without anybody noticing it was happening. So it's not something that It's not running on a schedule, it's working in real time, so you've got real-time access to all the data. If one person changes a file, everybody gets a local copy in their local storage if you want it to. Okay, so that's our HybridMount application. Again, it's completely free, and if you need more than 2 cloud locations, we do have extra licenses available. I think for most it would probably 2 would probably suffice, so you would never have to invest in it. But yeah, if you wanted to consolidate everything from multiple locations, whether they're network-based on something else in your network, or you have cloud locations, you can consolidate everything into a single NAS using HybridMount with very little resource allocated to it. If anybody has any questions, please do let me know, and we'll get back to you in the comments section below. Thanks a lot. Bye.